On the 50th anniversary of the signing of the executive order that officially desegregated the American military, Hollywood was showing its version of that war era on the silver screen. However, unlike the many veterans associations that have all but canonized Steven Spielberg for his war epic Saving Private Ryan, many black veterans feel that Spielberg's cinematic docudrama is a disgraceful misrepresentation of their participation in World War II. According to Spielberg, the reason he eliminated blacks from his film was to keep it historically accurate, since the armed forces were segregated at the time. Oliver Stone's answer to harsh criticism for his negative portrayal of blacks was that he was simply telling it like it was. To black vets, these statements are not only blatantly false, but stand as yet another excuse painted over layers of excuses that compound the notion that this country's most historically significant military conflicts were void of black heroes. For the past quarter of a century, this series has chronicled the history of blacks in the military, and a recurring theme seems to highlight each historical profile: the need for blacks to counter allegations of mental inferiority and cowardice as soldiers. We're going to examine this issue with some black veterans later in the program. But first, let's take a historical look at the black presence in America's wars.
Fuck is your war face at? Burning season, niggas. Killing armies. Yo, I wanna see your war face. Soldier, where's your war face? Camouflage inmates, collapse war gates. Yo, I wanna see your war face. Soldier, where's your war face? Camouflage inmates, collapse war gates. Yo, check the killer army. We go to war like tomahawks and Indians from the wilderness of our villages. Desert commander, live on a gorgeous fortress like the sorceress to build up my heritage. Shaolin surrounded by the cruel sea. Crabs get stabbed. Chemistry lab is filled with murderous vocab. They drive niggas crazy like Arabs and Manhattan cabs. Lyrics hit off the earplate, give off shockwaves that damage the airways for centuries and decades. I'll be a renegade through rainy days. I collect guns to blast off like shooting stars. Shout out to Charts, the soldiers from the dark. Stabbing and gabbing, dead in the fucking heart. A rhyming alcoholic, I'm bad for your liver. Unidentified corpses thrown in the Ohio River. I'm psychotic in the tropic. Bullets bust through bulletproof shoes of narcotics. Killer army, we run the train on Bobby Steele's tracks. Little components caught back with sharp tactics. I wanna see your war face. Soldier, where's your war face? Camouflage inmates, collapse war gates.
Here's the pure and uncut war poems from ancient zones. The black Hitler, killer Riddler, breaking bones, explosive. Overdose the track, coast to coast it by shockwaves to keep the thoughts bright like sun rays. My forte is of a higher rank like sensei. Militant, armed and killing and shake a settlement, searching crevices for a wise man's testament. Roll hotly, bludgeoning all those competitive against I, the stimulator of life and matter, the cloak and dagger. First I gag you, then stab you, the apprehender. Plus I move like a ninja, no retreat and no surrenders, but war agenda.
Live via satellite, soldiers with mics, ancient warriors fight, barbarians swinging swords, kill army, militant warlords, military war slang, who's to blame? Government officials, evil minds of government slang, got a plan for the blacks and the tans, decrease the population of the original nation by 1/4. Wickedness is a source, so the force I bring forth causes havoc, sparks, bloody riots, 7 days and 7 nights of a cool street fight, echoes of falling shells from automatics, strategic tactics, caught between rhymes, lines combined to blow up like landmines.
I strike with universal fish, I'm out to clear mystery, relentless, beat a nigga senseless. Niggas best to witness, and how I get the business. Soldier from the trenches, my offense be my defense with military sequence. Quick to apprehend ya, kids you best remember. Camouflage avenger, killer army nigga. Surrender your garments in your legal tender. Fatigue ninja with silent triggers.
Camouflage. Yo, I wanna see your war face. Soldier, where's your war face? Camouflage inmates, collapse war gates. Yo, I wanna see your war face. Soldier, where's your war face? Camouflage inmates, collapse war gates.
Test cavities, we shattering knees while bladders bleed. Gotta squeeze, it's a merciless form of my formalities. I lock down south with hip hop, doses of death within my breath that I drop to make your heart stop. You can't cope with this vocal dope that'll corrode your throat, yet alone make a local joke. I strip niggas of their manhood because I'm no damn good. And roll with a killer woo, clan the hoods. Attack vitals through recitals, leaving idols resurrected through the land of the lost with the fourth disciple. Stifle enemies, come test 21 in your chest. Killer bless them with a bloody vest.
I wanna see your war face. Soldier, where's your war
fear of armed blacks led to their exclusion from the militia during the colonial period. But wartime pressures forced the colonists to rescind that stance. Eventually, they even offered freedom to slaves as a reward for outstanding performance. Blacks were also not allowed to join the military at the outset of the Revolutionary War. However, the colonies soon adopted policies to include blacks when officials learned that the British had declared freedom for all blacks who joined them. Although many blacks fought for the spirit and principle of freedom espoused by our founding fathers, that freedom would not come to the black populace until another war took place, the Civil War. For almost 2 years, President Lincoln resisted the enlistment of black troops, claiming that the Civil War was a gentlemanly misunderstanding between white men. But wartime pressures would once, as in other wars, again demand the use of black troops in battle. Out of more than 186,000 blacks who served in the Union armies, more than 38,000 died, and they suffered a 40% higher casualty rate than white units. While the war to save the Union was raging, confrontations between whites and the Indians accelerated. The military following the Civil War afforded many freed blacks an opportunity to make a living and hopefully even earn a respectable position in society by defending their country. So the black soldier headed west. He was instrumental in making the new territory safe for American settlers. And because of his bravery, the Native American reverently called him the Buffalo Soldier. In spite of this, however, the white settlers resented and questioned the black soldier's presence. The next great military battle for black Americans was the Spanish-American War. They once again flocked to the recruitment officers to take part in the war effort. They were in the front line of battle and won numerous medals for bravery. Yet their display of patriotism and outstanding military service in the Cuban campaign did not improve their status in America. It is 1914. Europe and Russia are in the throes of war. Increased demand for wartime goods in the United States has created greater job opportunities for black Americans. Eventually, however, America joined the conflict. Blacks again rallied to the flag on a wave of patriotism. Again, the country resisted granting the descendants of African slaves the glory of battle. Their role during the war was primarily restricted to labor duty. Nevertheless, nearly a fourth of about 200,000 who went overseas saw combat, in spite of this restriction. The black 369th Infantry of the 93rd Division was one of the first to reach the German Rhine. The 369th Infantry Division had formerly been a Harlem National Guard outfit. The unit was shipped to South Carolina for training. Local whites were outraged. Black soldiers became the targets of racial abuse and violence. The situation became volatile. To ease tensions, the regiments in the 93rd Division were ordered overseas immediately. The trip to France was filled with mishaps. After pulling out of port on October 12, 1917, the ship broke down on the second day at sea. They returned to shore for repairs. On November 12th, they headed for France again, but this time a fireboard ship caused them to miss their convoy rendezvous. Misfortune again visited the ship carrying the men of the 369th Infantry. On December 4th, their ship collided with another. The damage was repaired, and the ship was underway the next day. Upon its arrival, the unit was relegated to service tasks for 2.5 months. The French, however, were in dire need of fighting men, so the regiment was formally transferred to the 4th French Army for combat. The unit fought in the trenches for more than a half a year and never lost a foot of ground or had a prisoner captured. The men fought so fiercely that the Germans and French dubbed them the Hell Fighters. Before the war ended, the entire unit was given France's highest Medal of Honor. The 369th Infantry returned home as heroes. Unfortunately, the battle for freedom won on the plains of France had not come to the black man in America. Blacks maintained a low presence in the military following World War I, but America would soon need recruits as the nation needed to mobilize its forces against Nazism. Because of pressure from the black community and the demand for increased military manpower, steps were taken to reduce discrimination in the armed forces. Blacks, for the first time, were admitted to the Air Force, flew as pilots, and served as commissioned officers in the Navy. The Marine Corps opened its doors, and the Army integrated its officer training schools. Segregation, however, still prevailed in the military and civilian life. About 1 million black servicemen and women served during the Second World War. Like their brothers, black women in the military have struggled to prove their worth. When the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps was formed in 1942, black women clamored to contribute their part in the war effort. In July 1942, 39 black women out of a pool of 440 women were on active duty. The word auxiliary was dropped from the name in September 1943, and by the summer of 1945, the Corps had 120 black officers and nearly 4,000 black enlisted women on duty. Black servicewomen would too feel the sting of bigotry. Participation in World War II did not better the condition of black Americans. A growing discontent among blacks and an unstable political climate prompted a change in the racial policy of the armed services. On July 28, 1948, President Harry Truman issued an executive order that would lead to the desegregation of the United States Armed Forces. The Korean battleground became the first true test of racially mixed units over a prolonged period. Integration, however, neither ended discrimination against black soldiers nor the charge that they were cowards. The 24th Infantry was the only black regiment in the Korean War. Desegregation of the armed services had dispersed most black units into larger white ones. While the North Koreans were moving southward, the regiment took Yecharn, the first town recaptured by American forces. But once again, familiar stories of ineptness began to surface. The unit was inactivated in October of 1951, under a cloud of bitter and controversial rumors. Most would forget, however, that 2 soldiers in the regiment, after their deaths, received the Congressional Medal of Honor for the first time since the Spanish-American War. Vietnam. The nation has entered its most controversial war. For the black soldier, it would mark a change in an age-old tradition.
In Vietnam, one of our concerns was that a disproportionate number of blacks were killed in combat units during the early days of Vietnam. And there is a reason for that. Young blacks, freed from any shackles as to where they could go or where they could serve in the United States Army, normally went to the elite units, the 82nd Airborne, the 101st, the 1st Cavalry Division. And as a result, those were the units that went to Vietnam first during the early days of the war. And those blacks were in combat infantry units, they were in artillery and army units, and they did suffer very high casualty rates. It's probably one of the sad things in American history that even though during World War I, you had units like right here from the New York area, the Fighting 369th, the 92nd Division that fought so heroically as a part of the French armed forces in World War I, that earned hundreds of croix de guerres, that between World War I and World War II, there were few, if any, blacks in the armed services of the country. And then in World War II, again, when blacks were called, over 900,000 blacks served in the United States Army during World War II. With great heroism, I could cite the example of the 761st Tank Battalion that was at the forefront of Patton's Third Army, and in some cases fought for days without adequate support. Were honored with many awards, individual awards, and yet it was not until just several months ago that the Secretary of the Army, the Chief of Staff of the Army, awarded the 761st Tank Battalion the Presidential Unit Citation that they should have been awarded some 30 years ago.
The long-standing belief that blacks were only suited for labor duties, combined with distorted historical background, was hard to die. Black troops, contrary to widely held belief, have handled tough jobs through America's military history.
The World War II history of the 92nd Infantry Division began in October 1942 when it was activated in 4 different locations. The reason it was activated at 4 different locations is that there was only one location in the United States that would accept a black division, and that was Fort Huachuca, Arizona. At the time the 92nd was activated, the 93rd Division was occupying Fort Huachuca, so the 92nd had to be activated in separate units of smaller size. These 4 locations were Camp Atterbury, Indiana, Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, Camp Robinson, Arkansas, and Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Now joining me in the studio are Captain Jehu Hunter, the Secretary of the 92nd Infantry Division World War II Association. Also with us is Sergeant Major Shelby Clark, the President of the New York chapter of the Coalition of Retired Military Veterans. Welcome, gentlemen. Sergeant Major Clark, looking at your decorations and everything, and you told me before that you are a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
That's correct.
That's a lot of war.
Yes, it is.
How many years were you in combat? How many years were you in the military?
25 years.
And how many of those years did you spend in wars?
I enlisted in the Army in September 1939. I went overseas in March of 1942. I landed in Liverpool, England. I was in the North Africa campaign from Sicily. And in 1944, I joined the 92nd Infantry Division, and I was assigned to them until the war ended in 1945, and I went to the Pacific, the Philippine Island. And I came back. Then when the Korean War broke out, I went back again, and I was assigned to the 24th Infantry Regiment. I was integrated in 51 in Korea from the 24th to the 35th Infantry Regiment of the 25th Division. And I remained with them until 53. I came back, and I was assigned to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and I was the first black sergeant major, that post sergeant major in Fort Rucker, Alabama. I remained there till I went to Vietnam in 63 as a military advisor at 33rd Vietnamese Infantry Airborne Ranger Battalion. And I remained there till from 63 to 64. I came back and was assigned at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, again with the 82nd Airborne, and that's where I retired at.
Captain Hunter, when you served in the infantry also.
Yes, that's correct.
When you look at a veteran like Sergeant Shelby, and then you see a movie like Saving Private Ryan, what goes through your mind?
Well, first of all, there weren't any blacks involved.
In Private Ryan?
In Private Ryan. And
you were in World War II?
I was in World War II. And this, of course, was before the integration of the armed forces. So, frankly, I sympathize with any infantryman who has to make that kind of trek.
What did you do during World War II?
I was, first I was a mortar platoon leader, and then I became the communications officer for an infantry battalion.
Were you fighting? Did you fight the Germans?
No. Mm-hmm. I was in support of combat operations. That's the way they labeled it. My responsibility was to keep telephone lines intact.
What's wrong then, either of you? What's wrong with the movie Saving Private Ryan? What's wrong with the statement by Steven Spielberg that he didn't include blacks because they weren't integrated?
Well, I think that was probably true at the time.
That they weren't integrated.
They weren't integrated.
But what about fighting? I've got footage of black soldiers fighting.
Yes, but they were all fighting as separate units. They weren't.
Well, I know that, but I mean, they were fighting. They weren't on holiday.
No. Oh,
yeah,
no.
That's my point.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, like in his movie, they don't exist.
Okay. Well, I haven't seen the movie, so so that's why I'm hesitant.
What did you do in World War II, Sergeant Major?
World War II, I was a platoon sergeant with the 92nd Division, 370 Regimental Combat Team, and I remained. That was my duties all throughout World War II as a platoon sergeant.
What did you do? Did you fight?
Yes, I did.
Who did you fight?
I fought the Germans, and I fought the Koreans, the North Koreans. I fought the North Vietnamese, and I was, like I say, in the 24th Infantry Regiment. I was first sergeant, but I was still on the front line.
Were you ever wounded?
I was wounded in 1943 in Palermo, Sicily. I got the Purple Heart. And my thinking about the Saving Private Ryan's, it was black units over there that was qualified to be included in Saving Private Ryan instead of being excluded. I mean, the reason for that, like they say, we was fighting in a segregated war, but they still could have been units picked to save. We all over there to save Private Ryan and everybody else.
We were over there to save Private Washington too, weren't we?
Right.
And Private Brown and Private Smith.
That's true. There wasn't any excuse for not including blacks in saving Private Ryan.
You mean in the movie?
Right. Because we all over there was fighting at the same time.
So historically, what do we conclude then about the movie that's now being hailed as the greatest thing since bubblegum? What do we conclude about the authenticity of the movie? Is that authentic?
Well, I think it's authentic in the sense that you have a white unit that's going to save one of its own. That's reality. That's the way it was. I'm judging by what I've seen of the little clips. These individuals are fighting World War II. They aren't fighting. They aren't fighing a later period of time.
Well, but here's Sergeant Major Clark, who was fighting. He was a platoon sergeant. You were ducking bullets there, weren't you?
That's true.
Were you jumping out of airplanes then?
Not then. I was only went airborne after the war was over.
After World War II.
Right.
But by Korea, you were airborne.
Right. But like I said, it still was black troops over there that could have been picked. We was already over there saving Private Ryan. That's what we was over there for, and saving America. But we still could have been a black unit picked to, to go and look for Private Ryan, just like they picked the white units. I mean, like I say, we was excluded, not included. And they had a policy of doing that, excluding all blacks, and all. They didn't want us to become role models or heroes. They wanted to picture us as cowards, but we was always excluded. We didn't have.
Did any black heroes come out of this?
Out of the, it was a lot of them coming out of the. Like the 761st, they was over there. Of course, Tim and I, we was in a different era, but we still was fighting for the same cause. We should have not been excluded. They should have picked a black unit, just like when they picked blacks for the paratroopers.
Is there go ahead.
Well, you got to remember that right after the Battle of the Bulge, when an awful lot of quotes, white soldiers were lost. The Army moved to integrate the armed forces in a kind of a side-by-side way.
Yeah.
You had these soldiers who were told that they could volunteer to serve in the Army and help win the war by fighting with existing regiments and divisions.
But being in a segregated army,
yes,
did not mean that blacks didn't fight.
No.
Well, I know, but that's where we have arrived. In
Right.
other words, if Mr. Spielberg says he didn't include blacks in the war, not on this one mission, Saving Private Ryan, if that even ever happened, maybe just
Right.
fiction.
Sure.
But it does not mean because there were all black units and all white units that black units didn't fight the enemy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's the point I'm trying to get to here.
Yeah.
And because that's what people are taking from it. That well, because they were segregated, only the whites did the fighting.
Yeah, well, that's...
And they didn't fight because they were cowards. This is what we have found in every war we have examined.
Right.
And that rumor always was there were no blacks around. And you always find blacks who are in somewhere in the fray.
In the 4th platoons that were set up after the Battle of the Bulge, there were black soldiers, some with stripes, insignia, who fought in platoons led by white officers, okay? And they fought very well. And some were even decorated, okay? That really was the first indication or movement towards integration of black and white infantrymen. Of course, after President Truman did his thing, then things
That was in
changed
1948,
even more.
wasn't it?
Yeah, 48.
Mm-hmm.
Then
He
things
desegregated
changed.
the armed forces.
Right, and things changed even more.
But like Tony Brown is previously stated, even though we did fight, we fought the enemy, we fought the American whites also, but it was still, blacks should have still been included in Saving Private Ryan, because blacks was over there. I mean, the way they showed the movie, that they excluded us, that we didn't participate in combat. I mean, that's the way a lot of people walked up to me and said, well, I know my father fought in World War II.
Well, you couldn't have gotten all those medals if you hadn't been in combat.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a whole lot of jumping out of airplanes there.
Yeah, right.
And for each hash on your thing, that's 6 months overseas, isn't it? That's what it used to be when I was around.
This for overseas.
That's
this is for 3 years. Each one of those count for 3 years.
3 years of service. Yeah, that's overseas over here, right?
Yeah.
And that big star in the middle of that's big time Sergeant Major.
That's right. That's top ranking NCO.
NCO,
right.
non-commissioned officer.
And the 2 stars in my combat badge is for 3 walls. They don't give you 3 combat badges.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, Sergeant Majors run the Army.
That's true.
Yeah, the officers come and go.
That's right.
But Sergeant Majors run things. They're the people who really know all the details and all the everything.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being with me.
Tony Brown Productions produces this program and is solely responsible for its content.